Hey, what's going on? Jake with Chain Genius, back for another episode of the Crypto Daily Update, and luckily today, the market hath provided some news other than just talking about pricing. Knowing that, we're going to hop right in first of all to talk about pricing, and it's pretty much continuing to be terrible. Hovering around 328 billion, Bitcoin still cruising right above 8,000, Ethereum 600, Neo popped right below 70. Basically just another terrible, no good, very bad day for the market. Digits DAO does well whenever there seems to be a dip, mainly because it's backed as an asset backed by gold, so it's considered stable. Tether's still tethering to $1. Otherwise, this top 100 list looks remarkably terrible. Popping right into some news that's going on today. Circle's going to be launching a CoinBse competitor. They're going to allow you to use an app called Circle Invest, which will basically let you buy cryptocurrencies and hold them within the app. There's no fees. You can use an ACH transfer, similar to Coinbase. The biggest difference is they don't charge any additional fees the way Coinbase does. However, this is not a true exchange, and that's why I keep mentioning Coinbase, is you're buying from Circle. You're not buying from other peers. And there is going to be a little bit of a spread. So while there may not be any direct fees per transaction, you're going to probably pay a 1 to 2% premium on market price just to be able to have this extra service from Circle. So interesting. It's good that there's more competition. As much as I love Coinbase and GDAX, more competition forces everyone to get better at what they're doing, bring prices down. It's generally a healthy thing for the market. So I'm happy to see that. Unfortunately, there's 4 states that aren't going to be allowed. It's New York, Minnesota, Hawaii, and Wyoming. Go figure, New Yorkers never get any of the fun stuff. The next thing I wanted to talk about is this comes on the heels of the SEC and Congressional Subcommittee hearing that happened yesterday, and one of them accidentally let a Freudian slip out that Bitcoin hurts government control of the dollar. And it comes off the back of, this quote here that it allows a few dozen people to sit in their pajamas and tell everyone they're going to be millionaires. He's basically talking about this is only used by crooks, criminals, speculators, tax evaders, and startup companies that want to commit fraud, which is a gross overstatement, although it does happen in the space. But then farther down, the actual quote that was let slip was, it hurts the U.S. government in 2 different ways. Our ability to have the U.S. dollar as the chief means of international finance is what has underpinned our ability to impose sanctions. Basically, that's kind of true. One of the interesting things and why I fell in love with the blockchain space as a whole is that that's exactly what this should be doing, is removing the control of these secular governments and other organizations that don't necessarily need to exist in every facet of our lives. Of course, we need roads, we need police officers, we need schools. But when it comes to sending money back and forth, they're really concerned about the lack of control and also being able to impose sanctions, especially on bad actors in other countries. So I understand where they're coming, but generally that means a technology is moving on the right course if it starts to cause a general sense of fear in the industry or in parts of the world that are being affected by it. Moving on to one of the big pieces of news today is Lightning Network has officially launched its beta, which is huge. For those that don't know, Lightning Network leverages SegWit to create off-channel transactions so that if Alice and Bob want to send Bitcoin to each other or handle a lot of microtransactions, instead of paying for each individual one, they can open up what are called state channels. It's a private channel between 2 people or 2 parties, and they can do as many transactions back and forth, having to only pay the fee to open the channel and then close the channel. I'm grossly oversimplifying a lot of this. If you want to learn more about Lightning Network, I highly recommend you read up on it. But they officially launched, it's focused for developers with Lightning Network, but they've launched a beta, version 0.4, on the mainnet, which is huge. And there's a couple of highlights, a lot of things that are going to be happening. Bitcoin Core support, improved fault tolerance, better path finding, automated contract resolution. It only allows for SegWit wallets, which makes sense because SegWit is needed in order to enact Lightning. And I'm just skipping down a little bit. Some of the things that they're going to be working on is what they call watchtowers and multipath payments. And what those are is that's basically how, or they also call it autopilot and mission control. What that does is it allows, so if Bob wants to send money to Carol, but he doesn't know how to open a channel, and I have a channel with Alice and Alice has a channel with Carol, then Alice can pay Carol, and then when I see, or Bob sees that Alice has paid Carol, I would then reimburse Alice. And then using smart contract time locks, it would unlock all the funds for everyone. So it removes the need for third-party trust. So that's coming up. And the other thing that Lightning will enable is cross-chain atomic swaps. And you've probably heard a lot about this, but it lets me, with Bitcoin, be able to potentially sell my Bitcoin directly to someone else for Litecoin, and we exchange them on the respective chains accordingly, not requiring a third-party intermediary, which is really huge for the technology. So this goes on. This is another article from Bloomberg that talks about the fact that Lightning Network also, with this announcement, raised an additional $2.5 million of seed funding, which is Lightning Labs, who's kind of spearheading the whole development of this particular version of Lightning. But what's really interesting to note about this is from THOR on Twitter, is he talks about, yeah, the 2.5 million is huge, gives them some runway, it's great, they can pay the developers, but really, if you look at the partners who's investing, you have the CEO of Square, Jack Dorsey, you have Twitter, BitGo, Robinhood, and PayPal. All of those could potentially help with Lightning adoption as major watchtowers on the network. And what a watchtower basically does is, if I don't know an individual party to sell to, these watchtowers can act as relayers because they have lots of connections, and then they allow me to pay some other person or sell my Bitcoin potentially without directly knowing that person, and kind of circumvent using an exchange. So this is really huge because those could act as major gateways. That being said, Lightning Network doesn't come without some issues, and this is a really good article where I think he talks about it from Jonald Fuchball, pardon me for butchering it, but he talks about some of the issues that, and I'm going to gloss over a lot of this, that come with this. And the primary issue is, if it's fully distributed like you see in this graphic here, it becomes cumbersome, because in order for me to pay Bob to pay Alice to pay Carol, Alice has to have the money in her wallet and then has to effectively loan it out until Bob pays Alice back. And if you're doing this on a massive scale, once Alice is out of money, it creates a major problem. So you're going to have some form of centralized or semi-centralized hubs like you see in this middle picture here. The thing is, that's not inherently bad. It does create more centralization, which is a problem, but it's not bad in the sense that because of the way that these are set up, sorry, I'm just looking for the TLDR, the protection comes in the form that as these relayers are moving Bitcoin to another party, I don't pay them until I validated that they have paid that third party. So there is the trust there. The only issue that I have personally is, as some of these relayers become central hubs, they potentially could raise up transaction fees. Although in a competitive market, the theory is, if someone starts overcharging, another party will come up, act as a relayer with better pricing. So pricing discovery will happen in the market naturally. Again, similar to what you see on the markets where pricing starts to balance out. There is the issue of potential collusion, assuming one company or a few relayers partner together, similar to the mining issues of 51% attack. And the other issue with Lightning is, as users spend their income, available routes degrade until the time that more funds are deposited. In other words, if I was to receive my salary, I'm at maximum routing power. I can fund and cover more transactions than towards the end of that pay cycle when I might be lower on funds. So as this happened, it cuts routing power in about half, which is really interesting to understand. Again, I really recommend you dive into this to get a better understanding overall. And the last thing I wanted to touch on is just kind of this TLDR summary. And to reach anyone in a big network with a series of branching channels connections, you either need a large number of channels or a large number of hops, and both create problems. The larger number of channels means that you have to divide up your funds, and you can't do anything except tiny purchases. And a large number of hops, meaning if there's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, where it takes me 6 hops to get connected to Kevin Bacon or anyone else, my money's tied up until everything else has been completed. And even if that happens quickly, to reach a mass scale of tens of thousands of 100,000 transactions a second is going to require doing multiple hops in high frequency and speeds, and that can create a small issue. So it's just some of the things. It's more logistical issues than bad actors coming to the network. So that's what I wanted to cover there. I think that's a huge step forward because it's a breakthrough for Bitcoin in general. Moving on is Monero's hard fork is coming up, which is going to be pretty cool because it's doing a couple of different things. It's supposed to happen on the 28th of March. It's been delayed a little bit. Looks like it's going to be block 1539500. And this is a emergency hard fork where they're going to basically protect against ASIC miners, which have started to become a problem. Recently, Bitmain, one of the monopoly players in the mining space, has recently announced that they're going to be launching some ASIC miners for Monero on the Crypto Night algorithm, which is what they use to secure everything and keep all your transactions private. So one of the issues that's going to happen, though, is, of course, that Bitmain's ASIC miners won't work. And these have been announced to be released in April or May, so it's going to actually make them worthless before they even come out. But what's more interesting about this is someone makes a good point here. They're quoting that you'd be naive to not think Bitmain has been mining with these for months and are now selling them before they get bricked with this ASIC hard fork. And again, a little bit of a tinfoil hat, but most likely they were testing at the very least these products on the mainnet and probably mining with them. So now be very careful because as of this hard fork, Monero is going to be ASIC resistant. Finally, on the main Monero blog itself, where they talk about the proof of work change coming up, they mention the main reasons that they're doing this are threefold. It's difficult, by forcing decentralization, it's difficult to pressure miners into not confirming certain transactions or otherwise acting as censors. Second, it lessens the pressure towards centralization because if someone doesn't have a competitive advantage and a patented method to do that, it'll force decentralization and less consolidation. And thirdly, what it does is by not having centralized mining, it makes it harder for governments or regulatory bodies to compromise the security of the network. Right now, for Bitcoin, using them as an example, if Bitmain goes offline, 25 or 30% of the entire hashing power disappears right there. So if China shut them down, it'd be a massive problem for the network overall. So what this is doing is kind of taking a step ahead of time to protect themselves. There's also a Reddit thread that talks about a few of the other pieces that are going to be coming with this update, including multi-sig sub-addresses, and like I said, the main thing being to kill off the ASIC miners by making everything ASIC resistant. And for a little bit of fun and drama in the space is Fluffy Pony was recently, he's the lead dev on Monero, recently was banned by Bitmain's Twitter, which is pretty funny because the drama never stops in this space. Finally, the last thing I wanted to mention is Binance's hot wallet for VeChain has been steadily losing supply. And that's really interesting because we're coming up to a really important deadline on March 20th for a token lockup event. For those that don't know, VeChain originally started as supply chain logistics and has moved into a more formal full platform play. And they launched a series of nodes, and what they've decided to do to encourage early adopters to lock up their nodes even more is they introduced these things called X Nodes. And X Nodes are basically the same as the previous 3 nodes that they set up, but now for an additional 6K VET that you lock up, by March 20th, you get additional incentives and rewards. And the thing is, you can upgrade to higher tiers of these X Nodes, but you can't downgrade. Otherwise, you'll be kicked into the normal version and you can never get back to it. So what's happening is a lot of people are locking up their VEN right now for this March 20th deadline because that's the only time you will ever be able to get an X node. You will never be able to get a new one. You will never be able to downgrade. So once you get one, you can either move up, holding more VEN, or you can stay where you are, but you can't ever get it again. So huge economic incentives. I don't know if I personally agree with that because what it's doing is forcing low liquidity, which will drive price up, possibly. And on the other side, I do understand the benefit because you're forcing everyone to run nodes, so you're strengthening the network and you're making a pretty low barrier to entry. I say relatively compared to the Molinor, which is 156,000. The VeChain X node is only 6K, so it's relatively small. And that last piece to me is interesting, mainly because it shows that people are taking up the opportunity to go lock up their VET in order to get these special X nodes that provide an additional bonus. Yeah, special reward from the foundation pool. They locked up an additional 50 million VET that they're going to be passing to anyone that's holding these, and you can see those numbers here, and I'll link that below in the description. So that's all I've got for today's crypto update, and love for you to hit that subscribe, like, comment, tweet, whatever, and until next time, peace.